Hello, and welcome back to the HearTOGETHER Podcast from the Philadelphia Orchestra. I'm your host, Tori Marchiony, and this is a space to hear from the artists and activists working hard to create a more equitable future, inside and outside the concert hall. You just heard a clip of our guest today, the renowned pianist Michelle Cann, performing Bach's Sarabande.
Throughout my entire life from 10 years old, I always come back to Bach. If I just want a moment to just play and enjoy music, it's like I have to pull out something from Bach.
Michelle Cann made her orchestral debut at the age of 14 and has stayed pretty busy ever since. She earned her bachelor's and master's in piano performance from the Cleveland Institute of Music, as well as an artist's diploma from the Curtis Institute of Music, where she now teaches. In 2022, she received the Sphinx Medal of Excellence, recognizing her outstanding work ethic, spirit of determination, ongoing commitment to leadership, and artistic excellence. The Sphinx organization is focused on increasing representation of Black and Latinx artists in classical music, an ambition Michelle has held dear from the outset of her career.
I think one definite issue that I had was that when I was younger and I kind of looked around me, I definitely had right there in my home, my older sister as a great role model, as a pianist and even as a teacher. And in that sense, it was like, oh, well, here's another Black pianist, but this is my sister. So I sort of took that in certain ways for granted. And I wanted to see, well, who else is out there who's looks like me and made it, essentially, and has a big career. And I remember being disappointed at least for what I knew, right, at that time, to be kind of a small number. I just couldn't find much information about more than maybe a handful. That was definitely one thing that at least gave me pause. I mean, I am thankful more than anything else that I had a really supportive family. My parents were very much behind pushing my sister and I throughout our childhood to be our best at whatever we did, beyond just playing the piano well, whether it was in our studies and all of us played multiple instruments and just bringing our best to the table. So one thing that I think is really important is to acknowledge how that family structure, or whatever your family structure is, what you're, exposed to every day, and like how important that is supportive. And so I think that definitely made a big difference in terms of just self-confidence, regardless of what I might have been seeing out there in the world. Whether or not that discouraged me, it didn't hinder my progress. It definitely didn't hinder my drive. If anything, I think I had more drive to try to be successful because I felt like there wasn't enough of us pianists out there that looked like me.
You've spoken in previous interviews about how early in your career you would sometimes doubt yourself and second guess your abilities. And I'm wondering, looking back from this position you're in now, if there's any advice that you would give to your younger self at those crossroads.
When I was young, I was really obsessed with, well, I have to play this piece and I have to play it perfectly and I've got to get all the notes right. And, in the way that I would sort of self-analyze based on what I perceived was the most important thing in order to be successful. Oh, I'm not practicing enough. Oh my gosh, that pianist practices for like 7 hours, they say. And so I'm not doing enough. And I feel like there was this constant battle when I was, high school or even, my undergrad, of feeling like I wasn't doing enough. I wasn't getting enough notes right or whatever it is. And so what I would tell my younger self, which is what I tell my students now, is, you were focusing on, sure, those things matter, but you were focusing on the wrong things, or you were focusing on them way too much. Because when someone hears you, whether they're a judge, now that I've been a judge in big competitions, whether they're a judge in a competition or they're the audience in a, recital, every single person wants to be moved. They want to have a really kind of an emotional experience and connect to you as a musician on that stage and the pieces that you're playing. I would tell my younger self, like, I'm sorry, perfection is not key if anything, like if people really want perfection, then I mean, hey, the world's really changing. There's like robots that can do everything these days, so if that's really what they wanted, I mean, honestly, you could just find some robot. I mean, we already have the pianos that self-play, so there you go. No mistakes, nothing's wrong. People don't want that. They want a real human experience, and the human experience is not perfect. It's about the music first. And obviously, yes, do you want to make sure you get as many notes right as possible? You practice that. You're drilling all these things. Sure, the whole package matters. If it's a complete mess of a performance, well, unfortunately, they're going to focus on how much of a mess it was. You weren't prepared. So in no way am I saying like, don't prepare. But in the end, always keep your focus on what are you trying to say through this music? What are you giving the audience? Or what are you teaching them? Are you bringing something new to the table? Like, what are you doing to give them an experience that they've never had before? As an example, I was teaching a lesson today on a Chopin Ballade, and we actually took a moment to go through YouTube and listen to some really great names, Ashkenazi, Horowitz, Zimmerman, a whole bunch of great pianists play the same Ballade. And we were looking at this one section, and it was so interesting with this young student because they were, well, that was completely different. I was like, I know, right? So this interpretation of this passage was between 3 or 4 pianists was very different across the board. So I said, so what's the right one? Okay. And I mean, he didn't really necessarily have an answer for that. He told me what he preferred, but they all were pulling from the score, what they did. It was just approached differently. So then the question is, are we trying to just be right? I mean, because we don't even know what that means, we're trying to be convincing. And if you, again, have something to say that's very valid to you, then you can play this music in such a way that will convince an audience.
I'm curious if you consider yourself a naturally competitive person and how your competitiveness has like impacted your path in music.
So ask my sisters about how Monopoly games go. But the amount of like boards being thrown. So anyway, there is definitely a certain amount of natural competitiveness to me. Absolutely. The interesting part though, is that more than anything else, it's just because I can be very self-critical. So it can be something where if I do something and, I lose, it's not even just about like who beat me. It's about how well did I do? You know what I mean? At whatever I was doing. So in music, this would show itself in competitions when I was young and through high school. And I remember there was this one particular competition, and I think I got 3rd place, and this other guy, he got 2nd. But long story short, we were standing on the stage ready to get our awards or our honors or whatever. And he kind of turns to me and, kind of haughtily is like, well, 3rd is better than nothing. And, something like this. I just remember leaving that competition and I was like, he's never going to beat me again. Forget just the music or, just the fact that I'll grow as a pianist. I was like, I will beat him. And, 2 funny things. He never beat me again. That is, I think I made the most progress that year for whatever he wanted. Maybe he helped me. The other thing is we're friends now. So it's actually really cool. We're still, he's the nicest guy ever. But
that's so awesome.
So that's my little story from a young age. But I don't know if that's the best, example or advice to kids. Like, this is what you should practice.
Well, I don't know that it's like advice so much as just real talk that like this entire industry is set up around competition and to make you compete with yourself and with your peers. And so the fact that, it motivated you in this way to reach your greatest potential, which is awesome. But on the other hand, do you think that the competition is necessary as a part of music making? Do you think that if people weren't pushing each other like this, we would have these great results that we do, or is it necessary to compete?
The value that I see in competitions is that because of the nature, this is human nature for most of us, is that we do have a competitive spirit to us. I mean, honestly, it's also like survival. Let's just, on some level, right? We're trying to make sure that like we're the strongest at this or that, we can't help this. The process of getting ready for a competition, I think, can be very valuable in terms of when we have that kind of motivation to say that, oh, we're going to be judged and whatever, ooh, we can win money or whatever the reason is. There's this like external motivation that, can enhance whatever internal motivation you already have. And you push yourself sometimes, for this goal to a level that you might not have otherwise. Then what happens when you put that much effort, so much effort, and then you don't win anything? And sometimes you don't get anything. Sometimes you just lose, right? You don't even make it to the next round. So the question is, how do you step away from that? How do you come out of that? Are you actually remembering that, hey, this is subjective. Hey, I think about Simone Biles and that with the Olympics and how people were just like, oh, we're so shocked. And it's like, I'm sorry, she's a human being. And this is one moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
We all know she's unbelievably phenomenal, that like, we've never seen anything like this. We know this, right? But on some level, we're all just so shocked that she could. I'm not shocked at all. Because,
right.
You know what I mean? This is one moment in time. What, are we supposed to be perfect all the time?
Right. And her value, her long-term value, her skill, her merit doesn't hang in the balance every time she goes out there.
Yes.
Even though we want to treat it that way, even though we want to treat it like it has to just constantly be increasing, that's not the way people actually can be.
No, they can't. And I think, so what do you do with that? And I guess that's personal. I mean, I've seen so many musicians, I've seen it. I've seen them just burn out. I'm not saying don't push yourself, but at the same time, look at all the violinists, all the pianists, all the harpists, every instrument that are phenomenal and that people love them for so many different reasons. And remember that is the end. The end of all of this is just to make you the best that you can be, and understand that people will accept you if you love yourself in your music and you put that love right into your instrument and into the audience. They're going to accept you. And in that moment, they're not going to be sitting there focusing on like your bio and looking at like how many competitions you didn't win.
True.
Or you didn't do. Like that, it isn't the point. It's not the end.
Do you feel like at this stage you understand what is so special about your playing?
I guess I understand what the kind of feedback that I get from people, and I get it. I think the most common feedback that I've gotten over, even since when I was young, was that you're not afraid to just put your heart out there, to just put your soul sort of right on the table and say, here it is. And when I'm in the moment of a performance, my goal is to do just that, is to put honesty on the table through music, through whatever the composer is trying to get you to hear, but also the story I'm trying to tell you. I realize that in order for you to really experience the way I do, then I can't hold back in terms of putting that raw emotion through the keys. I have to, when I'm feeling that something is very painful in a passage, I have to actually really feel that pain. And maybe in my mind, I'm picturing whatever that means for me. It could be something really personal. I've actually written like words or even poems to pieces that are connected to my own life experience. And not to share with anybody per se, but just for inspiration when I'm trying to learn the piece and like really connect to it. And so when I perform it, I'm thinking about that story. I'm thinking about those words. I'm singing those words. And so I have to be willing to put that reality, to put in whatever it is, love, happiness, joy, the broad spectrum of emotions. I have to be willing to just put that out there and let the audience see all that there is.
That was Michelle Cann performing the second movement of Florence Price's Sonata in E minor on NPR's From the Top, a show she has also hosted. There are kind of two questions that weave together, so I'll just give you the spiel and then ask you the question. So my research team and my editorial council, we talk a lot about the colorblind myth of meritocracy that we in America love to believe, like, well, the cream will rise to the top no matter what other factors might be at play, it'll just happen. And one of our researchers, Tim, is an actor, and he gave this example that the most phenomenal Black actors are constantly getting asked to play Othello. And the underlying message there is, you're so exceptional that you must be included, but you're still Black. So that inclusion must be on very, very narrow terms. And I know that you've had your own experiences with that kind of like pigeonholing. And I'm curious if there was a particular point that you realized that how institutions were going to involve you would be related, but not directly correlated to your merit. And then the second part of that is if your parents at any point had a conversation with you about how race might play a role in your career, and if so, how that conversation went. So big, giant, loaded question.
Yes. I'll start actually with my parents. That's actually interesting. My parents, if you want to sort of speak on some level of the idea of sort of colorblind, on some level, that was how they raised us. And not to say that they didn't acknowledge, I mean, of course, they acknowledged the fact that, you know, we were Black and we should love ourselves. And so I don't mean it that way, but I mean it in the sense that they never used the fact that we were Black. They never let us think or believe that we would be limited for that reason. We were not raised to focus on that. You can't really hide this from your kids, right? Because as soon as they're out doing things, they experience the different, sometimes maybe subtle, sometimes more obvious discrimination in different ways if they're literally just going out into the world. So I think what was interesting was we are in this household that's, you know, they weren't going to, I think their whole approach was, we don't want them to feel limited from the get-go. We're not going to try to have them focus too much on, oh, well, the world thinks I can't do this as well because I'm Black. So in other words, it was just like, well, in this household, we have this expectation for you and we know you can meet it. And so we're going to keep pushing you to that. That was their focus, on just raising us to be strong women. And all of my sisters, it's an all-girl family. We're all very independent and very confident in ourselves. So I think that this approach was good. And I'm grateful for the fact that they were just trying to say, hey, you guys are smart, you're beautiful, you're capable, and just go out and conquer the world. Now, on the side of then when we actually left the home and went off to our various schools and had different experiences, I still think back and I feel so blessed for the piano instructors that I've had over time. Because your piano, you know, your personal musical instructor, whatever instrument you have, is honestly the closest relationship you have in music school, because they're seeing you every single week or more. They're part of your development the whole way through. And so it's actually really, really important that your private teacher does not pigeonhole you, right? Because I feel like it can start there and then you go from there. So I had, you know, my first teacher was Paul Shenley at Cleveland Institute of Music. And he believed in me from the get-go. He absolutely did. I remember it was my first year there. He put me in masterclass opportunities, recommended me for performance opportunities. I got to play at the Kennedy Center. I think that was my freshman year, giving me extra lessons. I mean, he just believed in me as a pianist, right? So I had this advocate in him that, again, sort of sheltered me from probably what I would have experienced if I was just on my own trying to make it and I didn't have that kind of support, you know, from someone powerful, right? And where I probably felt, if anything, pigeonholed, it was coming from my peers sometimes. I remember that when I first came to conservatory, you know, for my bachelor's degree, there were a couple of comments that stuck out to me, and I knew what they meant. That's why I said sometimes these things are subtle. And so a couple of different people, oh, you're a vocalist, right? Oh, I thought you were a vocalist. And so I remember those comments, and I remember someone else who just, and they said, wow, I mean, I didn't expect you to be so good. And I remember when they said this, and I said, wait, what do you mean? Why do you do not expect? And I remember that this person like stumbles on their words a little bit and says, oh, I mean, just like, cause your personality, cause you're just so like outgoing and fun. And I didn't expect that, I thought, you'd be more serious if you were this good, or, and they really tried to make up for it. But I read through it, and I remember it just disappointed me, because I realized that I was coming into a space where people expected me not to be very good. Admittedly, when I finished school and I'm sort of out there trying to have a career, I did notice that, well, the only concerto opportunities that I seem to be recommended for all the time are Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. That's not the only concerto I've learned. That's not all I can do. Can I play something else? And now I'm so grateful that I am doing other concertos. I'm definitely doing Gershwin. I'm definitely doing Florence Price, who I love, but I'm doing other pieces with the orchestras. And that I think is so, so important, not just for me. It's important to see, another pianist, Stuart Goodyear, who plays all sorts of rep, and he's a composer himself, and I love him as a pianist, and many others, Abadaj and Pratt, as I start to go through different names, and I see that as time goes on, they're playing all sorts of repertoire. Something that I noticed when I was a little bit younger, I'm starting to see that slowly change. And it's so important, because again, we think about that younger generation that looks out to see what's going on. And I don't want them to look out and see Black pianists just playing what we've been pigeonholed to play.
Here's Michelle Cann playing Chopin's Ballade No. 3 in A-flat major, Opus 47, at the Curtis Institute of Music in July 2020. Michelle takes her role as a mentor to the next generation of Black pianists quite seriously. Over the years, the outlets have shifted. She's worked with young people in West Philadelphia through an El Sistema program called Play on Philly, and later created her own program, Keys to Connect, which brought parents and students together to learn piano. But her education evolution is far from complete.
So I remember when I first came to Curtis, and I was ready to just focus only on piano and practicing. And again, going back to this idea where I thought, well, I'm not good enough, and that's because I need to be practicing 7 or 8 hours every day, and I need to only focus on that, because I've always been someone who has a lot of interest. So my undergrad, I was doing a biology minor. I was taking violin lessons. I was sticking my foot in a lot of places for a while. And I felt like, well, I could be even better if I wasn't doing these other things. So I'm just going to practice. And I remember that for a semester, I did that. And by the end of the semester, I was like using up the allotted free therapy that you could get and asking for more sessions, and I couldn't quite figure out, I was like, why am I so depressed? Well, of course I get it now. When your only focus is sitting in a practice room, especially pianists when we're very solitary, for hours and just drilling, and you're not doing anything else that's positive in your life, whatever that may be, then, you're not finding that balance. And eventually it's going to get to you. So that's really where I was. And I remember I got this call from Stanford Thompson, who runs Play on Philly, or the founder. And he said, hey, I've heard about you, and we need somebody to work with our children's choir, and we need somebody who, has teaching experience and many other things. And that I did. So I thought, well, I do need to pay these bills and maybe try something else. And I remember just thinking, like, I've never done this, a children's choir. But I step right in. And I have to tell you, I spent 3 years with Play on Philly with the choir, and it was life-changing for me. When you're working with kids who are new to all this, the last thing they're doing is being anywhere near as self-critical as I am sitting in a Curtis practice room, right? They're just enjoying the little things. They're enjoying their progress. There's this positivity generally in that atmosphere. And I just remember just stepping out into this environment and feeling like not only was I doing a good thing and that I mattered as a teacher to these children, but that they were doing so much good for me, that their energy and their enthusiasm to learn was changing me. And I guess all that to say that I didn't need too much therapy after that, just, a regular amount. And, and but anyway, I just remember like entirely I was so much happier. I knew that on some level, I just always needed to be working with kids or, mentoring in whatever way it was going to be. I had to do it. And I always have. It's looked different. So when I left Play on Philly, I actually started my own program that I did for a while called Keys to Connect. It came out of my experience as a child, like understanding how important it was to have parents that really, connected with what you did and connected with you musically in some way, and how special that was. So Keys to Connect was really a project to bring one parent and their child together to learn piano collaboratively and in a group class. So we had like various families in one class, and they would be at one piano. And, we were just learning piano together. We even had a lot of talks, and I brought in a family therapist one time, and we'd have these like just discussions, and it was really beautiful. I did this for a couple of years, and I was actually asked to come into a middle school, charter school in Philadelphia. And I had to take a break on the parent and child concept because they wanted me to work during the school day. And so in this case, I had 8th graders and 1st graders work together. And again, it was amazing. I had 8th graders who were just like so negative about the experience, and I hate little kids, and whatever it was they felt. Let me tell you, when they got their kid, it was all about making sure that their kid knew what they needed to know. It was really, really, really great. I actually did this program for a while at this school until the principal changed and my life kind of changed. And I had to take a break on that program at that particular school. But I never wanted to stop finding a way to encourage younger kids in music. I've always been a teacher. I've always had various ages of private students myself. But one thing that stuck out to me, and a future plan that I absolutely plan and hope to implement, is that I've noticed that on the side of, back to looking into the landscape and looking to see where are all the Black pianists? I don't see as many that are really making it still, right? And when I look and think about it, I realize that, even with Play on Philly and a lot of really great programs, a lot of them don't necessarily involve piano. It's difficult to do. You have to have individual keyboards for everything, the resources involved, and you can only take so many in one class, where you can have a whole orchestra of kids, right? Playing string or wind instruments. So it's difficult to, I guess, hit the same numbers. And on the other side of things, piano is something that honestly, in order to be very competitive at that instrument, you have to start pretty young, and you really do need to have private one-on-one instruction. And so at any rate, I started to notice I kept being, introduced or approached by, teenage or maybe even early college, a variety of Black pianists that struggled in various ways, whether it was technical or maybe they hadn't done enough rep or, repertoire, or whatever it may be. And I would see that they were so passionate, but they didn't have the support that they needed when they were younger. So they were ready to just go out into the world and get into the big schools or whatever. They weren't competitive. They just weren't there, right? And I remember just being so frustrated. And I thought, this is where I can really make the difference that I want to leave. The kind of change that I can specifically focus on. Do you see what I mean? Because there's enough organizations that are putting instruments in children's hands, and that's great. But there's not enough focusing on pianists of color and giving them the support and the rigorous training that they're going to need, even if they can't afford it from that young age, and seeing them through. And so that's what I want. I want to create, a school or some type of program, whether it's collaborative with another program or independent, that focuses on rigorous training. It's like its own little conservatory in and of itself. And it's, scholarship based on need, and that no one's held back because they can't afford it. But in order to stay in the program, they have to be committed to the work. I want parents that are serious about where their child is going. And as long as the parents are supportive and the child's willing to commit, then we're going to see you through. Like, I want to see that. I just want to change that landscape. I want some really, really competitive pianists of color. And there already are some. I'm not trying to say there aren't, but I'm trying to put a lot more out there.
Conservatory coming soon. Thanks so much to Michelle Cann for stopping by. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, comment, and share with your friends. I'm Tori Marchiony, and this has been the season finale of the HearTOGETHER podcast from the Philadelphia Orchestra. We've got some exciting changes in store for you in season 3, so be sure to tune in this fall for more. In the meantime, we hope you'll enjoy Michelle Cann playing Florence Price's Piano Concerto in one movement with the Philadelphia Orchestra.